The alien training arena was alive with noise. Hundreds of voices shouted, laughed, and whistled from the tall metal stands. Bright lights burned down on the center platform, where fighters from all over the galaxy tested their skills. The air was hot from the crowd and smelled faintly of oil and scorched metal. In the middle stood Ethan, the only human in the entire tournament. He was tall but not heavily armored like the others. His clothes were simple: dark combat pants, a sleeveless shirt, and light boots. In his hands, he held two short wooden sticks connected by a chain. Across from him stood Captain Zara of the Ralvan Guard. Her armor was polished silver, her shoulders broad, her helmet decorated with a crest that marked her as a champion. She carried a massive double-bladed staff that glowed faintly with energy. Zara was famous for her strength and speed, and for never losing a match. When she saw the strange weapons in Ethan's hands, her lips curved into a smirk. "What are those?" she called, her voice echoing through the arena. "Toys for children?" The crowd laughed with her. Some shouted insults. Others made animal noises to mock him. A few spectators even pretended to swing invisible sticks, stumbling like drunks. Ethan didn't answer. He simply looked at her, calm, almost bored. His nunchucks hung loose in his hands, the chain swaying gently between them. He rolled one shoulder, then the other, as if warming up for something far more serious. Zara raised her staff high. "You are either very brave or very stupid, human." Still, Ethan didn't speak. He began to spin the nunchucks slowly, the chain making a faint whistling sound as it cut the air. The movement was smooth, controlled, almost hypnotic. The laughter from the stands grew louder. "Spin them faster, human. Maybe you'll fly away," one alien shouted. Another yelled, "Hit yourself with them and save us the trouble." But something in the way Ethan moved made a few in the crowd go quiet. His stance shifted slightly, feet apart, knees bent, weight balanced. His eyes never left Zara. It was the stance of someone who wasn't nervous at all, someone who had done this before many times. Zara noticed the change and frowned. It was small, almost nothing, but her instincts told her this man wasn't as unprepared as he looked. Still, she was a champion. She had fought bigger, stronger, faster opponents and crushed them all. This human would be no different. The referee, a tall insectoid alien with glowing eyes, stepped forward. "Begin when the gong sounds," it announced, voice clicking with metallic tones. The tension in the air shifted. Laughter faded. All eyes locked on the two fighters. Ethan's spinning slowed. Zara's grip tightened. The gong hung in the air, ready to be struck. For a moment, the noise of the crowd felt distant, as if the whole galaxy was holding its breath. The gong rang, and Ethan moved first. The sound of the gong rang across the arena like a deep thunderclap. Zara exploded forward, her armored boots slamming against the platform with enough force to make the ground shake. Her double-bladed staff flashed in the bright lights as it came swinging down toward Ethan's head. The crowd roared. This was the moment they wanted, the first blow that would crush the human's foolish confidence. But Ethan didn't flinch. At the last second, his nunchucks blurred into motion. With a sharp, snapping sound, one wooden stick struck the side of Zara's staff, redirecting it just enough for the weapon to miss his head entirely. The force ran through the staff, into her arms, and made her fingers tingle. Zara blinked in surprise. That hit, small as it looked, had power behind it. She stepped back and swung again, this time faster. The staff came from the side, aiming to smash into his ribs. Ethan moved with shocking speed, twisting his body and spinning the nunchucks in a tight circle. The chain slapped against the staff's edge, and the wood followed instantly, knocking the weapon upward. It was like his arms and the nunchucks were one thing. Fluid, sharp, and unstoppable. The crowd's cheering began to shift into murmurs. Some leaned forward, squinting, trying to follow the human's movements. The chain flickered in the air, catching the light, and then vanished again in a blur. Zara tightened her jaw and struck a third time, bringing her staff down with all her strength. The sound of the impact cracked through the arena as Ethan's nunchucks met it dead-on. To Zara's shock, the force bounced back into her arms again. She staggered half a step, realizing that he wasn't just defending, he was stealing her momentum. Before she could recover, Ethan moved closer. The chain of his weapon whipped around the base of her staff with a metallic hiss. In one smooth pull, he wrenched it from her hands. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Some even stood up, pointing at the sudden change in the fight. A champion of the Ralvan Guard, disarmed in less than 30 seconds, it was unheard of. Zara's eyes narrowed. Without her staff, she had only her fists and the weight of her armor. That should have been enough against most opponents. But this human, there was something about the way he stood, the calm in his eyes, the quiet control of his weapon. It made her uneasy. She lunged at him barehanded, aiming a heavy punch toward his chest. Ethan stepped sideways, his nunchucks swinging low. The wooden stick smacked against her gauntlet with a loud crack. She felt the shock all the way to her elbow. The crowd didn't laugh anymore. They were silent now, their eyes darting between Ethan's smooth footwork and Zara's tightening stance. Ethan didn't say a word. The chain swung lazily between his hands, but his body was coiled, ready to strike again. And Zara realized this was no ordinary human. Zara shook out her arm, the sting from that last hit still buzzing in her bones. She had faced countless warriors, but none had ever moved like this. She tried to convince herself it was luck, just a few lucky strikes. But deep down, she already knew it wasn't. She snarled and rushed forward again. Her armored boots hammered the floor, closing the distance in 3 powerful steps. She swung a punch at his head with all her strength. But Ethan was already moving. His nunchucks spun so fast they became a blur, the chain slicing the air with a sharp whistle. The first stick struck her wrist, redirecting her punch away from him. In the same breath, the second stick slammed against her thigh guard with a loud crack. Zara grunted in pain and tried to grab him, but he was gone, sliding past her like water slipping around a rock. She spun to face him, but by the time her eyes found him, his weapons were already in motion again. The crowd began to murmur louder now, pointing and leaning forward. Some were still trying to follow the human's movements, but it was almost impossible. He was too fast. The nunchucks didn't just spin, they snapped forward like striking snakes, hit, and returned before anyone could react. Zara swung again, this time with both fists. Ethan ducked under one and stepped to the side of the other, his nunchucks tapping both her elbows in quick, stinging strikes. The sound was sharp, wood against metal, and each hit left a faint dent in her armor. She cursed under her breath. That was the second time he had damaged her armor with those toys. The pace of the fight climbed. Ethan's strikes were light, quick, and endless, like raindrops in a storm. One stick cracked against her shoulder, the other against her ribs, then both against her shins. Zara's armor, once shining and perfect, was now covered with small dents and scratches. Her frustration grew. She swung wildly, hoping to catch him with sheer speed and strength. But every attack left her more open. Ethan's footwork was precise, his balance perfect. He was never where she expected him to be. Then it happened. With a sharp flick of his wrists, the chain of his nunchucks whipped around her forearm. Before she could react, he pulled and spun, yanking her off balance. As she stumbled forward, the wooden stick smacked into her side plate with crushing force. The metal bent inward. The crowd erupted with gasps and shouts. Even the referee leaned forward. Zara's breathing grew heavier. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was a champion, yet she was losing control second by second. Ethan didn't gloat, didn't smile. He just stood there, spinning the nunchucks slowly, like a hunter waiting for the perfect moment to finish the kill. And for the first time in years, Zara felt a flicker of fear. Zara's fear burned into anger. She straightened her shoulders, forcing her body into a fighter's stance. She would not be humiliated by a human in front of the galaxy. With a roar, she charged again. Her armored fist came swinging toward Ethan's jaw, but he was already moving, stepping to the side, his nunchucks snapping up. The wooden stick struck the side of her gauntlet with a sharp crack. The impact sent a jolt of pain up her arm. She ignored it, swinging with her other fist, but Ethan ducked low and struck again, this time against her shin guard. Metal rang out like a bell, and the dent deepened. The crowd began to shout in disbelief. Every strike from those simple wooden sticks seemed to shake her armor more than any alien weapon could. Zara tried to rush him, using her size and weight to force him back. Ethan didn't retreat. He weaved around her, the chain of his weapon flashing through the air, each strike aimed at a weak point in her armor. Under the arm, behind the knee, along the sides. Every hit left another mark. Every hit made her armor feel heavier. She swung again, trying to crush him with sheer force. But Ethan's nunchucks blocked the blow, spinning with such speed that the impact seemed to vanish. Then, in the same motion, he twisted and landed 2 quick strikes against her chest plate. The sound was louder this time, metal bending under the force. Zara stumbled back, breathing harder. Her polished armor now looked worn and battered. Her pride stung worse than the bruises forming under her skin. The crowd no longer laughed. They were silent except for the occasional gasp when another piece of armor took a heavy blow. Even the other fighters in the stands were leaning forward, eyes locked on the human. Ethan stepped closer, his movements calm, almost casual, but his strikes were ruthless. He wasn't wasting energy. Every hit was placed exactly where it would hurt most. A sharp strike to her hip guard made her stumble. A quick tap against her elbow plate forced her to lower her guard. Then came the hit that made the crowd cry out. Ethan spun, the chain of his nunchucks wrapping around her shoulder plate, and with a violent pull, he yanked her forward into a crushing blow from the other stick. The armor cracked open. A jagged line split across the shoulder piece, part of it hanging loose. Zara froze for a heartbeat, shocked. She had fought battles on burning moons and faced predators with teeth like swords. Nothing had ever broken her armor in a fight. Ethan stepped back, spinning the nunchucks lazily, his eyes fixed on her. There was no arrogance in his face, only focus. And in that moment, Zara realized, if she didn't change the fight now, she was going to lose everything, piece by piece. Zara's pulse pounded in her ears. She could feel her armor shifting awkwardly on her body now, the broken shoulder plate hanging loose with every movement. She tried to push the thought away, focus on the fight, but the dents, cracks, and missing shine were like scars on her pride. She tightened her fists and lunged again. This time she didn't go for a single big hit. She threw a flurry of punches, each one aimed at the human's head or chest. If she could land just one solid blow, the fight could turn in her favor. Ethan moved like water. Every punch missed him by inches. He ducked, slid, and pivoted, his nunchucks always spinning, always ready. When she swung wide, he punished her with a quick strike to the ribs. When she stepped forward, he clipped her knee guard. Every counter hit made her armor weaker. The crowd began to roar. Not for Zara, but for him. Human! 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 Voices chanted from the stands. The sound pushed Zara to strike harder. She swung low for his legs, but Ethan hopped back, letting the blow skim the air. In the same heartbeat, he stepped in close, both sticks of his weapon slamming against her chest plate in rapid succession. Crack, crack. The metal groaned. A thin fracture split across the front of her armor. Zara's eyes widened. She staggered back instinctively, one hand pressing against the damaged plate. Ethan didn't give her time to breathe. He spun the nunchucks, the chain flashing under the arena lights, and came forward in a storm of strikes. Her forearm guard dented under a sideways hit. Her thigh plate buckled from a downward blow. Then, with a sharp twist, he struck directly at the weak spot he'd just created on her chest. The sound was loud, metal snapping apart, the broken piece clattering to the floor. The crowd erupted in shock. The great Captain Zara now stood with her chest armor split open, the protective layer gone. Beneath it, the black combat suit clung to her body, offering little defense. Her breath came fast. Sweat trickled down her temple. She had never been exposed like this in a match. Ethan stood a few steps away, spinning the nunchucks in slow, deliberate circles. He didn't rush her. He didn't speak. He simply waited, letting her feel the weight of the moment. Zara's pride screamed at her to keep fighting, but another part of her, a part she didn't want to admit, wondered if it was already over. She growled, forcing herself forward again. But Ethan's weapons were already moving. This time, there was no hesitation, no testing. He struck high, low, and center, every hit landing with brutal precision. A final blow slammed into her remaining shoulder plate, and it shattered completely, the metal pieces scattering across the platform. Gasps filled the air. Zara, the undefeated champion, was losing her armor piece by piece. And Ethan wasn't done yet. The timer above the arena ticked down, each glowing number marking the seconds. Only a handful had passed since the gong. Yet to Zara it felt like she'd been trapped in this fight for hours. Her armor, once perfect and shining, was now a mess of dents, cracks, and broken edges. The heavy plates that had made her feel untouchable now hung loosely, shifting uncomfortably with every step. She tried to push the thought aside. Pride was all she had left. She lunged forward with a shout, hoping to land at least one solid blow before the crowd saw her fall. Ethan didn't even flinch. His nunchucks whirled in tight, controlled circles, catching the light with each spin. He stepped aside from her attack and countered with a quick strike to her side plate. The weakened metal split further, hanging on by a single strap. The crowd gasped. Zara spun to face him again, but his speed was relentless. A downward strike smashed against her leg guard, bending it inward until she could barely move her knee. A follow-up blow to her elbow plate forced her arm downward, making it useless for defense. She tried to step back to recover, but Ethan closed the distance in 2 quick strides. His chain wrapped around her other arm guard, and with a sudden twist, the wooden stick slammed into it, snapping the joint holding the armor in place. The piece fell to the floor with a heavy clang. The timer's numbers glowed, 55 seconds. Zara's breathing grew ragged. She swung a desperate punch, but Ethan dodged and struck her chest again. This time, the final strap holding the broken plate gave way, and the armor fell to the ground with a sharp metallic crash. 58 seconds. Now she stood almost bare of armor, her black combat suit offering little more than a thin barrier. Sweat covered her skin, and her once confident stance was gone, replaced by the tense posture of someone fighting to survive. The crowd was on its feet now, shouting and cheering. Not for her, but for him. Human, 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 echoed through the arena. 59 seconds. Ethan stepped forward, spinning the nunchucks once more. The motion was slower this time, deliberate, almost respectful. He stopped just in front of her, his weapon hanging loosely in his hand. The timer hit 60. 1 minute exactly. Zara's armor lay scattered across the platform, broken and useless. The match wasn't officially over yet, but everyone in the arena knew the truth. This was a complete defeat. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Ethan simply looked at her, calm and steady. He had no need to finish her off. The fight was already decided. The referee stepped forward, eyes wide in disbelief. Time 1 minute. Victory to the human. The crowd erupted, the noise shaking the very walls of the arena. And Zara, breathing heavily, could only stare at the man who had done what no one else could. The roar of the crowd shook the arena. Alien voices of every pitch and tone echoed together, chanting the human's name over and over. Cameras hovered above, recording every angle of the match, broadcasting it to millions across the galaxy. Zara stood in the center of the platform, chest rising and falling with each heavy breath. Her armor lay in broken pieces around her feet. Every dent, every crack was a reminder of how this fight had gone. She had entered expecting to humiliate the human. Now she was the one exposed before all. Ethan didn't gloat. He didn't raise his arms in victory or shout to the crowd. He stood quietly, nunchucks hanging loosely at his sides, his expression calm. That calmness, that quiet confidence, made the moment even heavier. Zara's pride fought against the truth in her heart. She had been beaten completely, cleanly, and in only 1 minute. No excuses, no tricks, just skill. Slowly, she straightened her back. The crowd watched closely, expecting her to storm off in anger. Instead, she took one step toward Ethan. Then another. Her boots clanged softly on the metal floor. When she stopped in front of him, there was no hatred in her eyes, only a fire of respect. She extended her hand. "Teach me," she said, her voice steady. The arena fell silent. No one expected this. The champion of the Ralvan Guard, asking to learn from the very human who had broken her in front of the galaxy. Ethan looked at her for a moment. Then he gave a small nod and shook her hand. "You're already strong," he said quietly. "But strength is nothing without control." For a moment, the noise of the crowd faded into the background. Zara wasn't thinking about the cameras, the shame, or the rankings, only the fact that she had just met someone who could push her beyond her limits. She released his hand and took a step back, giving him a warrior's bow. Around them, the chants began again, louder than before. Even those who had mocked him earlier were shouting his name now. The referee raised Ethan's arm to declare the official victory. The bright lights caught on the nunchucks, making the polished wood gleam. In that instant, those simple sticks no longer looked like toys. They looked like weapons worthy of legends. Zara turned to leave the platform, but she glanced over her shoulder at him once more. Her pride was wounded, but her spirit was alive in a way it hadn't been in years. She knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far greater. As the crowd cheered and the tournament officials swarmed the platform, Ethan spun the nunchucks one last time, the chains singing through the air. He caught them neatly, resting them at his side, and walked toward the exit without looking back. Because for him, this fight was over. But for Zara, it had just begun.